Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning into this story. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. This is Tape 4, Echoes of the First Days. Riley Hart here, former reporter for the Daily Lantern. I'm now on the outskirts of Redwood Township, somewhere near the old highway. Well, I've lost track of days if I'm being honest. It's funny how time was so important once. Now all that matters is whether the sun's up or down. I'm out here looking for more stories, more voices. Everything I record is a piece of a puzzle that might help whoever comes after us understand how it all started. That's assuming anyone finds these tapes, or that anyone's left to listen. Some days, it feels like I'm just talking to the wind, but I have to keep going, keep hoping. Bailey's by my side, as always. Good dog. She's been limping a bit from an old scrape, but it's healing. I'd like to think she understands what we're doing, but more likely, she just wants to keep me out of trouble. She's had my back more times than I can count. Anyway, I found a lead on a small group that's been holed up near a church down the road. My plan is to trade some food in exchange for their stories. It's a risk. Everything's a risk now. But the more voices I gather, the clearer this history becomes. Even if I'm the only one who ever listens. I first spotted them on the second floor of what looked like a converted chapel. The windows were barricaded from the inside with planks, but I saw movement through a gap. It was 3 silhouettes, 2 standing, 1 crouched, as if keeping watch. The building sat on a small hill surrounded by dense trees. The location was smart. They could spot any approaching threat from multiple directions. Bailey and I approached carefully. The dog moved silently by my side. I'd learned from experience not to appear hostile or come off as too desperate. People do unpredictable things when they're scared. I raised one hand, showing I was unarmed, at least visibly. I see them up there. Hard to tell if they're armed. I only have a small pistol in my bag and a single round. That's my last bullet. Let's hope I don't need it. All right, here goes. When I got within a dozen yards of the chapel's entrance, a voice called out, "Stop right there, state your name and keep your hands where we can see them." I froze, one hand raised to show I meant no harm. "Name's Riley Hart. I was a reporter once. I'm traveling with my dog Bailey." There was a pause. The door opened a crack. A second voice, quieter, muttered something I couldn't quite catch. Eventually, the door swung open enough for me to see who was inside. 3 individuals emerged. Cass, a woman with short-cropped hair and tired eyes. She held a makeshift spear carved from a broom handle, the point honed to a fine edge. Julian, a tall man whose arms and face were smudged with dust, as though he'd been sifting through rubble. Louis, the one who'd called out, was stockier than the others. He wore a thick jacket with pockets bulging, probably storing scraps of food and tools. They looked cautious, understandable. They also looked very hungry, the kind of hunger that dulls the spark in a person's eyes. I offered them a small pack of crackers, the kind you'd find in old convenience stores. I'd come across a stash of them in an abandoned cabin a few days earlier. The wrappers were brittle, but the crackers were still edible. Hunger trumps expiration dates. "Cass, what's the catch? People don't hand out food for free." I lifted my recorder, showing its worn casing and battered microphone. "I'm collecting stories. If you tell me yours, how it all started for you, how you've managed to hold out, then these crackers are yours." They exchanged glances. Cass shot a wary look at Louis, who shrugged. Julian took a small step forward, eyeing Bailey with caution. "Julian, we could talk, I guess?" I nodded, feeling the tension in the air. Bailey stayed close, her ears perked. She was ready to guard me if things went south. We stepped inside the chapel. The wooden pews were shoved against windows angled as barricades. Old hymn books were scattered on the floor, some pages torn and used for kindling. A few sleeping bags were spread near what used to be the altar. I set the recorder down on a makeshift table, a slab of plywood balanced on stacked bricks. Before pressing record, I opened a side pocket of my backpack and removed a small portion of the supplies I'd stashed away weeks ago. I wasn't foolish enough to show them all my food, but I placed enough to prove my sincerity. We spent a moment settling into place, me on a stool with half a leg missing, them on worn cushions around me. I pressed the little red button on my recorder. All right, let's do a quick sound check. I'm here with Cass, Julian, and Louis in what used to be Redwood Township's local chapel. Tape 4, Echoes of the First Days. You folks mentioned you've been here a while. Louis. Not by choice. We ended up here after the highways went silent. We tried traveling, but every route was blocked by those things. And it wasn't just them. Some people on the roads were worse than any infected we came across. He paused, exchanging glances. Cass. We used to be part of a larger group, 10 of us. Most were from Redwood Township. When we heard the radio broadcasts urging people to head for the big evacuation sites, we tried that. We really did. The roads were chaotic, buses overcrowded, people got trampled. She swallowed, as if trying to force the memory away. Julian. I heard the radio say the airport was still open. Then we got there, and it was a ghost town. Planes grounded, runways empty. We found one plane locked up tight. We thought maybe the pilot was inside. But the only person there was an officer. National Guard, I think. He looked at us through the window, shook his head. We never saw him again. They each shared glimpses of those first days. Cass described how the local authorities tried to set up roadblocks, but were soon overwhelmed when the infected swarmed in large numbers. Louis spoke of hearing frantic news reports, first on television, then on the radio, until everything went dark. Julian recounted a heartbreaking scene at a relief station, where medical staff had run out of supplies within hours. He watched them turn away families with children, tears on everyone's faces. Do you remember the exact moment you realized the world wasn't going back to normal? Cass. Yeah, it was when I saw the grocery store. The place was full of people, frantic. But not just the infected, everyone was in a panic. The store shelves were stripped bare in minutes. People fought over scraps. And then I heard these screams from the back, near the loading dock. When I got there, it was too late. The rest of the day is a blur, but I knew that was it. No one was coming to save us. Her voice cracked slightly, but she cleared her throat and pressed on. Louis. For me, it was when the TV broadcast stopped. I was at home with my older sister, trying to keep her calm. We had the news on, and it was some official telling people to stay indoors and wait for help. Then the screen cut out. Static. We tried every channel. All gone. Julian sat quietly through this, his gaze fixed on a broken cross that hung crookedly on the far wall. Julian. I thought maybe I'd see my dad again. He was a security guard at the local mall. That place was sealed up for a while, you know. He said if something bad ever happened, he'd take me there. But by the time I reached it, the windows were smashed. The inside, I don't want to talk about it. I nodded, letting the silence stretch for a moment. After about half an hour of recording their stories, I stopped the tape. My intent was to hand them the crackers and go on my way, simple enough. But the longer I stayed, the more uneasy I felt. Something about their body language changed whenever I mentioned my supplies or my next destination. Louis in particular kept eyeing the backpack at my feet. I noticed it, but I tried not to react. Bailey sniffed the air, her ears twitching. She had an uncanny sense for tension, and her posture stiffened. I decided to cut things short. Look, I appreciate your time. I have what I need. I'll leave you these crackers like I promised. Maybe I can toss in a little more if... Louis, interrupting. Wait, so you're heading out now? It's dark soon. Why not stay here for the night? The suggestion made my stomach tighten. While it might have been genuine hospitality, it felt off. Perhaps it was the quick, pointed look Cass gave him, or the uneasy shift in Julian's seat. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but trust is a rare commodity now. Thanks for the offer, but Bailey and I have a safe spot a short distance away. We'll be fine. Cass, you sure? There are bandits around. Roamers too. You might want to wait until morning. I forced a smile, trying to remain calm. I appreciate the concern. We'll be careful. I packed up my recorder, gave them the crackers, and began walking toward the door. Bailey stayed close to my left side, muscles tense. As I reached the threshold, I felt Cass's hand clamp down on my arm. The gesture was firm but not yet violent. Cass, come on, we just want to make sure you're set for the night. No need to rush off. I looked down at her grip and then back into her eyes. Her expression was a swirl of desperation and guilt. And that was when I realized that they might not want me staying at all. They might simply want what I had. I tried to ease my arm out of her grip. Look, it's been a long day. The dog's tired, I'm tired. Louis stepped forward. What else do you have in that bag? Food? Medical supplies? Bailey let out a low growl, and I felt a sudden jolt of adrenaline. My heart thudded against my ribcage. It's not much, I said carefully. I keep a little for emergencies. Louis, bet you have more than you're telling us. He glanced at Cass. She nodded, and suddenly Julian was on his feet blocking the door. The atmosphere shifted from tense to threatening in an instant. I was cornered. Easy. I don't want trouble. I gave you what I could. Cass, you're a reporter, right? You probably stockpile supplies for long trips. You said you have a safe spot. Maybe you can share that location? I shook my head, trying to keep my voice steady. I've only got enough to survive. If I give it away, I'll starve. Louis' eyes narrowed. What makes you so special? We're starving here. I couldn't argue with their desperation, but I also knew giving up everything I had meant risking my life. The tension mounted. I could sense we were moments away from a serious confrontation. Suddenly, Cass lunged. She grabbed at my backpack. I stumbled back, fumbling to keep hold of the strap. Bailey barked, a sharp warning sound that cut through the stale air. The dog darted forward, but a swift movement from Louis knocked her aside. I heard a yelp of pain and my vision blurred with rage. Bailey! I tried to protect her, but Cass was on me, trying to pry the bag off my shoulder. I'm not strong, but adrenaline works wonders. We wrestled for control. The recorder, inside the bag, clattered out and hit the floor with a thunk. I felt the strap tear under the strain. My chest ached as someone struck me across the ribs. The world tilted. I hit the ground, winded. The next few seconds were a blur of scuffling footsteps, raised voices, and Bailey's growls. Then the dog was shoved aside again, and I heard a loud smack as something collided with my head. A burst of white light exploded in my vision. When the daze cleared, Cass was standing over me, rummaging through my bag, taking anything useful. Small tins of food, bandages, my last bullet, though they might not have realized there was a firearm too. My breath came in gasps, and I tried to call out to Bailey, but the words stuck. Julian, leave the dog alone. She's not hurting anyone. Cass, we need to ensure they can't follow us or take revenge. Louis, take what we can and let's go. His face was set in a cold, conflicted stare. He pulled a length of rope from a corner of the room. My stomach twisted. Were they planning to tie me up? Worse? Cass, voice trembling. I don't want to do anything extreme, but we need the supplies. We can't just leave them loose, not after... Julian, please. This isn't who we are. Louis, survival changes people, you know that. In the end, they decided not to tie me up. Maybe something about the dog's protective stance unsettled them. Bailey stood guard, lips curled, ready to defend me. They worried about her attacking if they tried to drag me around. Instead, they left me lying there, battered and barely conscious. They took the supplies from my bag, rummaged through my jacket pockets, and even pried my boots off, though eventually they dropped the boots nearby and left them behind. They didn't want to risk leaving me barefoot to freeze, perhaps out of a lingering shred of empathy, or maybe because the boots didn't fit well. I heard them whisper among themselves about needing to move camp, in case I brought others back. Cass insisted they smash the recorder so I couldn't replay their voices for anyone. Julian argued it was pointless. In the end, the device took a nasty blow from Cass's improvised spear. I heard plastic crack and my heart sank. Time blurred. Maybe I drifted in and out of consciousness. When I finally pried my eyes open, the chapel was dim and silent. Moonlight streamed through a gap in the barricaded window. My head throbbed, and each breath sent jolts of pain through my ribs. I tried to stand but collapsed to my knees. Everything ached. Bailey was there, whining softly, her nose nudging my shoulder. She seemed mostly unharmed, though shaken. Her warm breath against my face reminded me I wasn't alone. "Hey, girl." "Yeah, I'm okay. Well, I'm alive anyway." Using a broken pew as support, I pulled myself to my feet. The chapel was ransacked, my supplies gone. My recorder lay on the floor, battered. The casing was cracked down the middle and the buttons jammed. With trembling hands, I picked it up, half expecting it to be beyond repair. To my surprise, the cassette inside was still intact. The delicate tape reel was unspooled in one spot, but it wasn't fully destroyed. "Hang in there, maybe I can fix you." I patted the recorder gently, then tucked it under my arm. Survival was my priority, but so was preserving these tapes. They were my one chance to document everything, to preserve some shard of the truth. I stumbled outside. The night air was cold, stinging my lungs as I took a ragged breath. My bag was torn open, contents scattered, but the group had taken anything valuable. They left behind only a few items they considered useless. An empty notepad, a stub of a pencil, my battered flashlight. The flashlight flickered a bit but still worked. Using it to light the way, I limped across the overgrown churchyard and onto the empty street. My head spun, and more than once I nearly lost my balance. Bailey pressed her flank against my leg, as if trying to steady me. I managed to find an abandoned car half a block away. The doors were unlocked. I climbed into the back seat, locked the doors behind me, and curled up as best I could without aggravating my bruises. Bailey squeezed in, resting her head on my knees. Exhaustion washed over me, but before I let sleep take me, I forced myself to check the cassette recorder one more time. The battery compartment was dented, and the tape mechanism looked misaligned. I carefully rewound the spooled tape, hoping it hadn't lost everything. I whispered to myself in the dark, imagining I was speaking into the microphone. "Tape 4. I can't risk recording over it right now. It's damaged. I'll need to find parts, or maybe another recorder I can scavenge for pieces. But I still have the tape. I haven't lost everything. Bailey's here, I'm still alive." That group, they were so normal at first. It's easy to judge them, but I understand. They're hungry. People do desperate things for food. I just wish it hadn't come to this. I'll rest here for a bit. In the morning, I'll see if I can make it back to my stash. I pray they didn't find it. If they did, well, I'll figure something out. It's all I can do now. With that, I let sleep pull me under. I spent the next 2 days shivering in that car, drifting in and out of feverish dreams. At some point, Bailey left and returned with a dented tin can in her mouth, gleaned from who knows where. I managed to open it and found some leftover vegetables. They were bland, but it was nourishment. The dog is a better scavenger than me, I'll admit. Once I regained enough strength, we set out to find my hidden stash. The path was grueling, and every step felt like a hammer blow to my ribs. I leaned on a makeshift cane, a sturdy branch I found in someone's yard. Somewhere along the way, we passed the remains of an old bus stop. I remembered people once huddling there when the news told them to wait for transportation that never came. Now it was silent, covered in peeling posters, broken seats, and scattered debris. All part of the echo of those first days, empty promises from officials who never showed up. I thought back to everything the 3 survivors shared. Cass's memory of the grocery store meltdown, Julian's heartbreak at the mall, Lewis's despair when the television cut out. Those recollections now belonged to my tape, battered but safe in my jacket pocket. Eventually, we reached my stash, a small root-covered hollow behind a crumbling statue in a deserted park. To my relief, it was untouched. I carefully lifted a loose slab of stone, revealing a few cans of food, some water bottles, and a spare set of clothes. Not a king's ransom, but enough to keep me going for a while. As I ate, I fiddled with the tape recorder. It was in rough shape, but after some tinkering and cannibalizing parts from a broken portable radio I found in a nearby house, I managed to get it to spool the cassette again. The audio was scratchy, laced with static, but I could hear bits of our conversation in the chapel. Evidence, stories, proof that once we were normal, that we had families, routines, hopes. Now everything was changed. After patching myself up, I decided to document one last entry on the battered recorder, hoping it would still work. The mechanism clicked as I pressed the button. The audio hissed, but the red light glowed faintly, signaling it was capturing my voice. "This is Riley Hart, Tape 4, Echoes of the First Days." I managed to salvage the recorder, though it's not what it used to be. Bailey and I made it out. I lost a lot, but I still have my life and a few supplies. As for Cass, Julian, and Louis, I don't know where they've gone. Maybe they'll be okay. Maybe not. A pause. The sound of shifting fabric as I leaned back against the cold metal frame of the abandoned car I'd taken shelter in. My ribs ached with every breath, the bruises deep, sharp. Bailey stirred beside me, letting out a soft, exhausted huff. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, pattering against the cracked windshield. I can't blame them entirely. I might have done the same in their position. That's the real horror. The outbreak didn't just reshape our world. It reshaped us. It took our sense of community and carved it into fear. It pitted neighbors against each other for scraps. I exhaled slowly, watching the recorder's dim red light flicker. I wasn't sure if it was due to the recorder's damage or if the batteries were finally giving out. I'd have to find more soon. I'll keep going, keep searching for stories, because someone out there needs to remember how it started. The sadness, the chaos. It's important. These tapes are more than just recordings. They're testimonies of what we've become. And maybe, just maybe, they'll guide whoever comes after to do better, to be kinder. I shifted, feeling a dull throb in my side. The blood had dried, but the pain remained. I let my head rest against the cold window, staring out at the landscape. Dead trees, cracked pavement, remnants of a world that used to be alive. I thought about what Julian had said in the church, about the radio broadcast that stopped without warning, about the last time he saw his father. I thought about my own family. I didn't sleep much after that. The pain made it hard, but it wasn't just that. I kept listening for sounds outside, scanning the tree line for movement. Cass and her group had taken what they wanted, but desperation made people reckless. They could come back. Or worse, someone else could. Bailey stirred every now and then, ears twitching at the night sounds. Even in sleep, she was on guard. I spent the next few hours gathering my strength, waiting for the first hints of daylight to creep over the horizon. When it finally did, I pushed myself upright with a groan, checking my supplies. The remaining cans of food from my hidden stash weren't much, but they'd keep me going for now. I tightened the straps on my backpack, stuffed the battered recorder inside, and gave Bailey a reassuring pat. "All right, girl. Let's move." She stretched, yawned, and fell into step beside me as I limped toward the road. "Bailey and I will stay on the move. Our next stop is a small farmhouse near the city border. I heard rumors of a woman who once worked at the local broadcast station still holed up there. Maybe she'll have a story worth telling." Bailey lifted her head at the mention of movement, her ears twitching. She always seemed to know when it was time to move before I did. I reached out and ruffled the fur behind her ear. She let out a small sigh and leaned into my touch. "For now, I'll sign off. If anyone out there finds this tape, if you're listening, know that you're not alone. We're all echoes of the first days, shaped by what we've lost. But we're still here. That has to count for something. The farmhouse was a few miles away. If the rumors were true, maybe the woman there would have a working radio. Maybe she'd know if there was anyone still out there broadcasting. Maybe she'd have a story worth recording. But first, I had to make it there. And in this world, that was never guaranteed. And if you ever come across Cass, Julian, or Lewis, tell them I made it. Tell them I hope they did too. Thank you for listening. If this story sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps this channel alive. Until next time, stay vigilant and remember, curiosity can be quite the companion, and sometimes a curse.